Hello and welcome to this Meanwhile Elsewhere on the Spanish Civil War, which took place between 1936 and 1939 as part of our inquiry, how did communism and fascism shape the interwar period? So in this Meanwhile Elsewhere, we're going to focus today on the Spanish Civil War, which is a really important event that took place between 1936 and 1939 between two different groups within Spain who were called the Nationalists and the Republicans. In terms of chronology, the Spanish Civil War took place between 1936 and 1939, which came right at the end of the interwar period and just before the outbreak of the Second World War, which took place between 1939 and 1945. Now, the two sides were known as the Nationalists and Republicans. The Nationalists were supported in the Spanish Civil War by the fascist governments of Italy and Germany, whilst the Republicans were supported by the communist government of the Soviet Union. Britain and France decided not to get involved at all within the Spanish Civil War. So although it was a civil war, it was definitely a war that had a bit of an international dimension and was a bit of a precursor as well to the Second World War. So the main historical concept that we'll learn about in this Meanwhile Elsewhere: abdicate is when a monarch, such as a king, gives up the throne. Fascist is a way of running a country that usually includes a dictator as a ruler and has nationalists in power. A republican, someone who supports elected government rather than a monarchy. Nationalist is the belief your country is the best country and you're willing to use force or go to extreme lengths to support this idea. And a civil war is a war fought between two sides from the same country, such as the English Civil War or the American Civil War. And as we've seen, the two sides in the Spanish Civil War were the Nationalists and the Republicans. So what was the Spanish Civil War? Well, it took place between 1936 and 1939. Over 500,000 people were killed, so it can't be seen as a little war. It's often been overshadowed by all the other problems that were taking place in Europe during these years. The two sides were the Nationalists and Republicans, and the war was eventually won by the Nationalists, who were led by this man who you can see in the image, General Franco, and he remained the leader of Spain until 1975, and he set up and created a fascist government. And this fascist government was one of the last fascist governments within Europe in the 20th century. So what actually caused the Spanish Civil War? Well, as many other countries at the time, Spain was badly affected by the Great Depression, which was triggered by the Wall Street crash in 1929. This led to unemployment rising dramatically. In April 1931, elections were held in Spain, which resulted in the Republicans taking control of all the major cities in Spain. They declared Spain to be a republic, and the king abdicated, which means resigned, and the monarchy was abolished. And you can see there King Alfonso XIII, who was the king who abdicated. Now, this new republic faced a number of key problems. Two important regions in Spain wanted independence. They were known as Catalonia and the Basque region, and those regions still retain quite a focus on the idea of independence even now in the 21st century. The Roman Catholic Church, which was very powerful in Spain, was angry with the new republic. The government believed the army had too much say in politics and wanted to reduce its influence, and people were very poor, unemployment was high, and wages were cut. The republic faced losing the support of working class people. So those two regions, the Basque Country, centered around the Spanish city of Bilbao, is in the north of Spain, and then in the northeast of Spain, there's the region of Catalonia, and the major city there is Barcelona. So what caused the Spanish War? A little summary of that. The problem was that two regions wanted independence, Catalonia and the Basque region. So a solution to that was that Catalonia was given some independence to run itself. The problem of the Roman Catholic Church being angry, some of its power was limited, such as reducing the amount of religious education taught in schools. The Republic wanted to reduce the influence of the army, so many army officers, senior army officers, were made to retire, which actually angered the army greatly. And as people were poor, some farms were taken over by the government, nationalised, which is quite a communist idea, sort of not dissimilar to the idea of collectivisation that took place in the Soviet Union during this time. So the Republic managed to anger the most powerful groups in society, such as the army, the Catholic Church, factory owners and landowners. Policies such as nationalising the farms were linked with communism. So enemies of the Republic knew that countries like Germany and Italy may support them as they were against communism as well. Now, in the 1930s, there was political chaos with the resignation of the Prime Minister, there was strikes, there was violence, terrorism and elections. So in order to restore order, the army prepared to take control of Spain. Now, General Franco was one of the military generals and he took control of the military. He overthrew the government of Spanish Morocco and he planned to invade mainland Spain. So what General Franco did is he managed to land his forces in mainland Spain, bringing them over the Straits of Gibraltar, and the left-wing Republicans organised their forces to fight back. And this began the Civil War. So the Civil War had begun as a conflict between the nationalists, led by General Franco, and the Republicans who had been in government but have obviously alienated and upset many people in society. Now, in August 1936, the British, French and governments in Germany, Italy and the Soviet Union agreed to what was called a non-intervention pact, where they all agreed to not send any military supplies to either side. However, in reality, the Germans and Italians did support the nationalists and the Soviet Union supported the Republicans. That's because the nationalists had fascist ideas and the Republicans had, as we've seen with some of their ideas about nationalising farms, they had some communist ideas. Hitler sent his forces out to Spain and his Luftwaffe, which is his German air force, bombed some Republican cities. This was used to help train Germany's armed forces and prepare them for war. And you can see that in an image of the German Condor Legion, which saw German planes fight for the nationalists, the side of General Franco, in the Spanish Civil War. So here's a timeline of some of the main events in the Spanish Civil War. So one of the things that was a feature of the Spanish Civil War is that international brigades were formed of foreign volunteers who travelled to Spain to fight for the Republican government. So people like the British writer Ernest Hemingway, for example, who travelled over to Spain during the Spanish Civil War. In November 1936, there was a nationalist military assault on Madrid, and then in March 1937, a nationalist military assault on Guadalajara, which is a town north of Madrid. In April 1937, nationalists began to blockade Republican port, and then also in April 1937, the Basque capital of Guernica was bombed by German planes. The air raid was an attack on civilians and hundreds were in the centre of the town on a market day, but it wasn't a military target. 100,000 pounds of flaming bombs were dropped on the town and caused the destruction of much of the town. The Nazi planes were practicing dropping bombs for if the Nazis had to fight a war against the rest of Europe. Now, this event spread fear actually throughout Europe, and you can see there some of the stark images of what happened when Guernica was bombed during the Spanish Civil War, a very famous event in the Spanish Civil War. By May 1937, Republicans began to infight with each other, reducing their focus on fighting the nationalists. In July 1937, Spanish Catholic bishops supported General Franco as ruler of Spain. The Republican military attacked the nationalists west of Madrid at Brunete. In April 1938, Catalonia was cut off from the rest of Republican Spain by the nationalists. And in October 1938, the International Brigade, and we can see an image there of International Brigades fighting against the nationalists in the Spanish Civil War. So in October 1938, the International Brigade withdrew from the front on the orders of the Republican leader, hoping that international pressure might then force Italian and German troops fighting for the nationalists to leave. However, those troops didn't leave. In January 1939, nationalist military, they entered Barcelona and refugees from Spain started fleeing to France. In March 1939, Madrid was taken by nationalist military forces, and on the 1st of April 1939, the Republican army surrendered and General Franco declared nationalist victory and the end of the Spanish Civil War. So this was a key event, the Germans bombing the Spanish town of Guernica. The following painting was painted in response to this event by the artist Pablo Picasso. So, summary of learning, the Spanish Civil War took place between 1936 and 1939. It was caused by huge divisions in Spanish society sparked by the Great Depression. The two sides in the Spanish Civil War were the nationalists, the fascists, led by General Franco, against the Republicans, who were left-wing communists. Other countries such as the Soviet Union, Italy and Germany got involved in the conflict, so it's a truly international element to this civil war. The bombing of Guernica sent shockwaves around the world. The Spanish Civil War ended in 1939. Spain remained neutral in the Second World War, and General Franco remained the leader of Spain until 1975. So how does this link to our inquiry? How did communism and fascism shape the interwar period? Well, it helps our understanding of how communism and fascism shaped the interwar period in terms of the Soviet Union, Italy and Germany all sending forces to fight in the Spanish Civil War. In many ways, the Spanish Civil War was a battle between the different ideologies of communism and fascism. And of course, as we've seen, Spain was one of the last fascist dictatorships of the 20th century. Thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.